Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand. I'm Anand Narasimhan. After multiple weeks of decline, Bharat's forex reserves have increased by $1.153 billion to $585.8 billion during the week ending 13th of October. Now, in the previous week, the overall reserves had dropped by $2.16 billion, and it was in October 2021 that the nation's forex kitty had reached an all-time high of $645 billion. But it's back on the up, and that's a good sign. Now, meanwhile, with the inauguration of Bharat's first regional rapid transit system last week, rail equipment manufacturer Alstom has also marked the global debut of its modern signalling systems with its integrated platform screening doors. The European train control system signalling system will not only facilitate interoperability but will also reduce the waiting time for passengers. This system provides a high level of safety for trains running at close headway of 180 seconds. Bharat has also surprised the world by outpacing Europe in the 5G race. Notably, this recognition comes from none other than the CEO of Nokia, one of the global leaders in telecommunications. In the last 6 years, Bharat has taken a proactive approach in contributing to fifth-generation telecom standards and came up with 5G aimed at improving coverage in rural and remote areas, and that has ensured this lead in the 5G revolution. Ladies and gentlemen, let's now set up the big story that we're going to debate first up. And this is a straight-faced, straight talk that's been done by Bharat with Canada. And more importantly, while they have failed to provide a single shred of evidence on the allegations leveled by the Canadian Prime Minister, Bharat says we've got enough and more to tell you why we wanted your 41 diplomats recalled.
The government of India decided to unilaterally revoke the diplomatic immunity of 40 Canadian diplomats in India. This is a violation of the Vienna Convention.
We invoked parity because we had concerns about continuous interference in our affairs by Canadian personnel.
The diplomatic showdown between Bharat and Canada has only escalated after Justin Trudeau accused Bharat for getting involved in the murder of Khalistan terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar on Canadian soil. Now, we as a nation have been asking for proof for this claim right since day one, but the Canadians still haven't shared anything with our authorities yet. As the diplomatic equations turned icy, Bharat then called for diplomatic parity between the two nations, signaling a clear diplomatic downgrade for Canada vis-a-vis some other nations. The government asked for the recall of 41 Canadian diplomats and said that their immunities would be stripped if they don't leave the nation by the scheduled date. The 41 diplomats eventually had to leave, and soon after, a war of words broke out. Take a look at how External Affairs Minister Subrahmanyam Jaishankar has reacted sharply to the claims made by Canada by none other than their Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau said that the action taken by the government of India is contrary to international law. Dr. Jaishankar says implementation of parity is not a violation of international law at all. Also, then Justin Trudeau says this is violation of the Vienna Convention governing diplomacy. Ensuring safety is a fundamental aspect of the Vienna Convention. So where is it that we have broken the law? Also, it is something that all nations should be worried about, says Justin Trudeau. But Dr. Jaishankar says the problem is with a segment of Canadian politics and its policies. Justin Trudeau then further had said that India is making it unbelievably difficult for life as usual to continue. Dr. Jaishankar says we had to stop visa services as it became unsafe for our diplomats. And clearly, it will not be laissez-faire and it will not be usual service till the time Canada cooperates in its help or in helping India negate threat to Bharat from Canadian soil. The other aspect is provide evidence for the claims that you make. You've not provided a single shred of evidence. Now, amid diplomatic standoff with Canada, anti-India sloganeering reportedly took place on Sunday during a pro-Khalistan rally by a designated terrorist group Seeks for Justice. Now look at this, look at the hypocrisy coming in from Canada. They are giving a free run for those entities who've been designated terrorists. It's an American citizen who leads this entity, who's also been designated a terrorist, and he is standing on Canadian soil asking for the secession of Bharat or the breaking up of Bharat. This protest was held outside the consulate in Vancouver, and this comes as we as a nation have raised concerns over the security of diplomats in Canada. Dr. Jaishankar very clearly stating that this was the reason why visa services had been suspended for Canadians. But why were the Canadian diplomats asked to leave? Now, this is an exclusive input by our Group Editor Security, Manoj Gupta, and this is via government sources. Right at the top level, the government sources saying Canadian diplomats allegedly misuse their visa powers and their diplomatic immunity. The diplomats allegedly approved visas for some despite their antecedents, despite concerns and red flags. These same people were now allegedly carrying out criminal activities in Canada. The visas were allegedly given to those supporting secessionist cause or the Khalistan agenda. Canada is also not helping India in extraditing certain individuals, persons of interest who are criminals. Canadian diplomats were also interfering with Bharat's internal matters, and Canadian diplomats also got involved in and interfered during the farmers' protest. It was none of their business, but they meddled in our internal affairs. Bharat has also raised these issues with Canadian authorities several times. What next? What happens next? How are we as a nation planning to raise this issue of the K menace and the K bogey that is continuing to flourish in Canada? Top government sources further revealing to CNN News 18 that we as a nation are exploring options to approach the FATF against Canada, ladies and gentlemen. Bharat may raise the inaction against terror funding operations in Canada. We as a nation have credible and clinching evidence to back this claim. There is serious concern over funding and shielding of Khalistanis in Canada, and Canadians along with the ISI worked together, managed funding by instigating the diaspora, funds to a particular family or certain families multiplied by 10 to 20 times, especially around the time that there was a certain level of social strife and unrest that was being triggered on our soil. So there is a link, and Bharat has got the evidence to provide that link beyond belief, beyond a certain level of doubt, to convince this area and totally negate reasonable doubt. That's what we believe the government, Indian government has at its disposal, and they are ready to provide this evidence to the Canadian authorities, quite contrary to what Canada so far has not been able to provide. This entire victim spin by Canada, does it now fall flat? Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow ORF with us, Ambassador Rajiv Dogra with us, former diplomat, Daniel Boardman, Senior Correspondent for the National Telegraph, joining us from Alberta, and Kuldeep Singh Shekhawat, Director MATV, joining us from London.
Hello, Moto.
Let's go straight across to our guests who are already there with us. Namaste. Thank you very, very much for joining us here on this very special edition of The Right Stand. Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, is Bharat's position violative of the Vienna Convention, or is what Canada doing somewhere violative of diplomatic principles and fundamental engagement between two democracies?
Well, Trudeau has used two words. One, that it's violative of international law. What is violative of international law is giving shelter to terrorists and pampering terrorists, encouraging terrorists. So that's the first thing which should be quite clear. That's not India but Canada which is violating the international law with regard to the terrorists it has on its soil. As far as Vienna Convention is concerned, let me give you some of my examples. When I was in Karachi, Pakistan decided overnight to reduce the size of our consulate from 128 to 21. And it was very blunt in saying that it depends on the host state to decide the level of representation. The consulate's representation needed to be more than 120 because all the visa requests that were coming in on a daily basis for it. But Pakistan said Vienna Conventions don't prohibit us from deciding on the size of the host state's representation. USA has done it a number of times with Russia. UK has done it a number of times with Russia. Canada itself has done it previously with some of the other countries it is not friendly to. So Trudeau is deliberately misinterpreting Vienna Convention, which says very clearly that it is up to the host state to determine the level of any foreign country's representation. Secondly, Trudeau has been misinforming his own people, Canadians, and that is why I think Canadians themselves have started calling him somewhat of a loose cannon. Canada needs to reconsider whether it can keep on misinforming the world at large and hope to get away with it. The other thing I think which Mr. Trudeau must keep in mind is that by continuing down this path, he is not helping either Canada-India relations or 3 lakh Indian students who are providing $4 billion or more every year to Canada. So he is hurting Canada more than anyone else. And I think it will be a good step also to approach FATF regarding Canada's relationship with the Khalistani extremists.
So an American citizen who leads a proscribed terrorist organization, an organization proscribed by Bharat, he himself is proscribed as a terrorist, calls for the secession of our country on Canadian soil, Daniel Bodman, and that's freedom of expression under Justin Trudeau's regime. And Mr. Justin Trudeau is apparently being laughed at by the opposition in Canada. Is that true?
Well, I mean, is Justin Trudeau being hypocritical and saying ridiculous things within Canada and facing backlash? Yes, this is par for the course. And expect 2 more years of gaslighting and ridiculous statements, right? So Khalistanis running around harassing people, threatening to kill Hindus, freedom of speech. I mean, we got Palestinian protests running around harassing Jewish businesses, threatening to kill us, free speech. But people are saying, hey, men are men, boys are boys, girls are girls. We should not have, sex ed curriculum. That's hate speech. Police are called and investigating that. So that's the state of Canadian free speech. Like, if you want to try and kill Jews or Hindus or Indians, all cool. Incitement to violence, go team. But if you want to say anything else that sort of disagrees with general liberal policy, this is where we get into hate speech. So there's that. I'm actually happy with this show. You guys have hit the actual topic here on the diplomats. The problem isn't parody this or parody that, how many. The problem is it's a very clear line between someone in the Canadian political system, probably within the diplomatic corps and within the Liberal Party or the NDP, working in tandem to bring extremists into our country to foment this type of nonsense. This is the problem. It's not how many diplomats there are. There could be 50,000 Canadian diplomats in India. It wouldn't matter if none of them were smuggling Khalistanis into our country. And if there were just 2 diplomats, but they were both working to smuggle Khalistanis into our country, then there's a problem. Like, I'm glad we're actually talking about the issue at hand here, which is it's highly likely, and I've been saying this since like 2018, it's highly likely that there's parts of the Liberal Party in coordination with the ISI and other anti-India forces to bring people with radical ideologies into our country, set them up as community leaders, and then foment anti-Canadian activities on our streets, which are then no longer opposed. This is the problem. I'm glad we're talking about this is the problem. If you're wondering, will Justin Trudeau address this problem? The answer is no. You got 2 more years of this to deal with, unless the government breaks apart, because again, Jagmeet's totally in line with this and they have a coalition. So here we are. yes, sorry about the gaslighting India, sorry about our lectures on free speech when it's incitement to violence and then being ridiculous on it. But I would just say this makes you all more Canadian because we've been gaslit by Justin Trudeau. Now you can be gaslit by Justin Trudeau and you can get the full Canadian experience. I will bring a bottle of maple syrup when I come over, and then you can all be proper Canadians and we can all talk about what this guy is doing and how crazy it drives us.
Sushant Sareen, I have to afford myself a chuckle for that tongue-in-cheek remark by Daniel, but nations can't be allowed to get away with something like this. It's not, it doesn't make sense. There has to be somebody who's got to rap Justin Trudeau on the head and say, get it straight. And thereafter, he makes a comment that he wants to have a professional relationship with India very soon.
So Anand, let me just start off on a somewhat lighter note. You know, I'm kind of really, as an Indian, I'm really getting this FOMO, fear of missing out, that Trudeau has been having conversations with world leaders and not been mentioning India in that. So I'm kind of really missing out on that. But on the most substantive issue, look, here is the thing, you know, when you go to fill up a visa form, Anand, and we've all filled up visa forms of other countries, there are very clear, statements that you have to make, that there are no criminal case against you, that you've never been prosecuted, that you have no, you're not involved in anything illegal, or etc., etc. How come people who have a rap sheet as long as my height, which is not insubstantial, are given visas so easily? Now, there can be three reasons for it. One is that some of these guys are being bribed, and maybe lots of money is out giving. And let's not rule that out. It happens. It's par for the course. A lot of visa officers and consular officers are bribed. Maybe that's the reason. Second is, Canadian politics. You have a Canadian government of Trudeau, which is backed by this Khalistani fellow, Jagmeet Singh, who is a lowlife. And maybe, this is the quid pro quo. That until and unless, you allow some of these guys to come in, we are not going to, our support will be very, very conditional. I don't know how exactly Canadian politics works, but I won't rule it out because we've seen a lot of other stuff happen in Canada. And the third factor could be something even more sinister than this, something which I think Daniel has suggested on what, the Liberal Party might be trying to do. Now, whether that is in conjunction with the NDP and some of the other despicable elements who have set shop in Canada, I don't know. But look, it's very clear, if you've seen what has happened over the last few days in Canada, not just with the Khalistani thing, which has been going on forever, but now increasingly on this Hamas thing.
Yeah.
There is open incitement to violence, there is hate speech galore, and nothing is happening. And Daniel is right. The moment you start questioning somebody on their pronouns or the entire stupidity which surrounds this entire gender debate, you'll be thrown into prison. Apparently, there are imprisonment clauses for it, or at least at the very minimum, you'll lose your job. So clearly, I pity Canada. It's a lovely place, very decent people. It is a very nice and friendly country. But frankly, being saddled with clowns like they have in the Liberal Party, it's tragic what is happening to Canada. But look, here is the problem. These are guys who are, when it comes to China, for example, you see the kind of attitude Trudeau has. He's such a pansy when it comes to China.
Correct.
On a variety of other issues. Look at the way he jumps the gun, for example, on the issue of terrorism. I was seeing, ever since this whole fracas with Canada, I've been seeing a bit of what is happening in Canadian politics. He goes to, to sympathize with the Palestinians over what is happening in Gaza. I don't think over the last 2 weeks, he has gone to a single synagogue to sympathize with the Jews who were brutally butchered in Israel by these Hamas terrorists. These guys don't even call Hamas terrorists anymore.
Correct.
So I really wonder what kind of, a hellhole Canada is becoming where all kinds of these despicable elements, these terrorists, these fanatics, these radicals, these criminals, these gangsters are being invited in. They are being invited.
The ex-Hamas chief is on Canadian soil. So
yeah, and look, and they are being now given positions in government, positions in politics. I don't know what these guys are trying to do, but clearly, you know, it's fast becoming a bit of a rogue state.
No, but Kuldeep ji, I just want to understand this. Is this something which is happening in the UK also, and is the underlying thought that it's happening in some faraway land? Let these elements do whatever they want here, because doesn't affect us. It actually helps us, because this is like a soft tool to try and keep pinpricking a nation with whom we want to extract something out of.
See, Anand, UK, the situation is not as such as what it is in Canada. Canadian situation has two elements. One is Pannu and one is Jagmeet. And on the other side, we have a wonderful, wonderful comedian to look at, and that is Justin Trudeau. So what he does, he has messed it all up. Look, does he have economic power to match with India? No. Does he have security power to match with India? Does he have any other authority to talk the way he has spoken about India? I think the man has lost plot completely. And the way he is behaving, going around talking to people, it's something which is really not acceptable to a genuine person. Right. I think he has to put house in order. But if he doesn't put his house in order, things will go bad for him. Like you were just mentioning about FATA.
Right.
So that can happen, and that can really happen, and India can press for it. Because India is looking at things with a very right perspective. All these elements, which are so-called rogue elements, and who are trying to get the world order in a bad shape, are not accepted anywhere. Look, in UK also, now situation has calmed down a bit, because some of them have been treated with the iron hand by the government. But on the other side, some of these gurdwaras have started learning their lessons. Like the biggest gurdwara here in Southall, which used to have a very huge picture of Bhindranwale, stuck right in front of the gurdwara, has now been covered. And well, I spoke to some of them yesterday, and they said we want to remove it and replace it with some other picture. So it looks like there is some kind of thought process going on between
some positive movement in those aspects, but largely are we able to do much about this? And should India now walk the talk a little further and really up the ante diplomatically in terms of trying to take to task what Canadian entities were doing on our soil over the last 4 or 5 years, is something which merits serious consideration.